Welcome to New York's number 2 sports show. The Rangers beat the Dallas Stars in overtime by a score of 3-2, and the game-winning goal was by Vladislav Gavrikov. And this was a game that the Rangers really showed a good bit of bounce back after a really brutal, arguably one of their very worst losses of the season. There's been many of them against the Tampa Bay Lightning, where Adam Fox does get hurt as well. He was, in fact, placed on LTIR, meaning that he will be out at least 10 games, if not a little bit more than that, which is huge. And the Rangers followed up against a good Dallas Star team who, look, they were on a winning streak. They were bound to lose. It was a 4-game win streak that they had, a point streak that remains with, them losing the game in overtime, but they've been one of the best teams in the league. 7-0-4 on the road since October 22nd, 9-1-4 this season. So fantastic away from Dallas. Really, not even much of an argument. Really, the second best team thus far after the Colorado Avalanche. And the Rangers find a way to win. And, 41 shots on goal, a season high. They outshot Dallas 18-3 in the third. And I've been harping on this for the longest time. The Rangers finally get a game-tying goal in a 6-on-5 situation late in the game. And so this came with 2 minutes and 13 seconds left in the third. Will Cuylle scores the goal to tie it up, and the Rangers win it. And so it was the first time the Rangers had tied the game up on a 6-on-5 situation since March 2nd of 2024 at the Maple Leafs, where the Rangers lost that game. So it was the first time where they tied the game in that scenario and won since November 12th, 2023, home against the Columbus Blue Jackets, which was over 2 years ago. It was a goal by Alexis Lafreniere that tied it up. I actually remember that one. I think it might have been a Sunday night game. And the Rangers, I can't remember if they had won overtime or the shootout, but the Rangers won that. So there were many occurrences, most situations where it went from 2 goals to 1 goal, in most cases where the Rangers did score 6-on-5 goals. Not that many of them, but I think there had maybe been 7 in a row or so where, where either it cut it, where they didn't win the game, right? Plain and simple. So this had been a long time coming, not only to just tie the game, but to win it. And this is something that does happen fairly regularly in the NHL. So that was a huge, huge drought that is finally over. I do think that says something about a team. Look, in some ways it was kind of fortunate the way it happened, but well-earned in the goal itself, but well-earned in the fact that the Rangers really did play a strong game, especially in the third period. They were definitely the superior team. And, especially with Adam Fox, and it's a good Dallas Star team in a place where the Rangers have struggled at Madison Square Garden. Look, I think that the outlook still isn't great for this Ranger team. But at least here, they showed a lot of fight. And because there's every reason to believe that this thing could really go bad without Adam Fox in the lineup. I know they've had success before with Adam, but, that was a better, 2 seasons ago, it was a better Ranger team than this one. And who knows how they follow this up. The schedule is still really difficult, specifically the next 3 games. But yeah, this was definitely one of their better performances of the season. And maybe it can be a springboard. I'm skeptical of that, to be fair, but just keeping it where it's at in this game, some good stuff. And like I said, Rangers win the game 3-2, and Vladislav Gavrikov, who loses his defensive partner Adam Fox, has just been really, really good. It's a shame that he wasn't on this Ranger team sooner somehow. When the Rangers were really in legitimate contention, I think that Gavrikov really could have been a much needed piece to that, to that defense. But Gavrikov, it's funny, it's his 5th goal of the season. His career high is 6 goals. And this is a guy that, I want to check to just be totally sure. Yeah, he played 82 games last season, 77 the year before that, 72 the year before that, 80. The point is the guy pretty much plays close to a full season. And the most goals he ever had was 6. This is not, and he already has 5 goals in 28 games. It's just he, for me, again, has really been if you're proud of a Ranger, I think he's, like, towards the very top of that list. I mean, I know there's other candidates there, right? Like a Noah Laba comes to mind and a few others as well. Um, but yeah, Gavrikov, for the role he has, it's just been sensational. And it meant that Braden Schneider was thrust into a much more important role as his defensive partner. And for Schneider, I thought he acquitted himself fairly well. Wasn't perfect, but it reminded me, like, when Schneider has been given a bigger role, he has looked pretty good. Like, and I'm still disappointed with his overall growth and progression as a player. I still feel like you don't even really know for sure that he's a top four guy. I mean, I think the way I look at Braden Schneider, like, he's a good third pairing defenseman where you hope that he could handle top four responsibilities. And I feel like he was really good when Jacob Trouba was out for a few weeks in 2024. And I guess that would have probably meant that Schneider was paired up with Keandre Miller. If I had to, I think that's what it was, if I remember correctly. And I remember thinking that he played pretty well and thinking that it was better him being in that spot than Trouba at the time. So I'm just curious. And I wasn't sure what they were going to do, right? Because they could have maybe gone with Borgen with Gavrikov and had Soucy with Schneider, but they decided to keep the Soucy-Borgen pair intact. And, it makes for less change. Not that it would have been crazy to do, but Braden Schneider played over 20 minutes. And, he's been, with Borgen out recently, Schneider's been playing more minutes anyway, but this is a pretty big test for him, and seeing how he can match up against some of the best players in the league, paired with Vladislav Gavrikov. It meant that Scott Morrow was back in the lineup, and he was all right. He was all right. They didn't give him the number one power play responsibility. They went with 5 forwards, and the power play did not get the job done in a pretty big way, I might add, as well. So no Adam Fox may hurt you the most. I mean, it would either be the power play or 5-on-5, as Adam Fox's penalty killing time, I think dramatically has decreased this season, which I think is the right thing. But you really miss Fox in the power play. And it wasn't as if the Rangers had some opportunities. Some power plays were better than others, but it wasn't great. And so Scott Morrow, they're not comfortable having him in that number one role. And you can make the case either way, right? I could see someone saying, hey, you know what? Like, let's see what the kid can do and put him in that spot. And I could also see, hey, like, he's just not ready for that. So, they didn't want to do that. I still think it might be worth the shot just to see what it can bring. And maybe it brings about some confidence in him in his overall game if it does work well. Because I do think the Rangers are at a point in time where, yes, of course you need wins, but I think development is extremely important if you really look at the long run here and what's realistic. Like, certainly would rather see Scott Morrow in lineup than Vakanainen, for example, right? Even if that does lead to, some more negatives in these games. So yeah, it was Robertson with Morrow, and they didn't play a whole lot. Like, that they're going to be a little bit more of a sheltered third pair. There's just no doubt about it. But, ultimately they did all right. As far as the forward lines go, let's discuss that. Adam Edstrom was out due to a lower body injury. I feel like it was sustained in practice. Like, I haven't gotten a full read on that yet, but unless there was misinformation there, because he finished the last game and I thought it was reported that he was part of practice, unless that was incorrect. Either way, he was out. It's a day-to-day situation, so it shouldn't be something that keeps him on for too long. But Connor Sherry was bound to come back into the lineup anyway. So it's kind of one of those things where I think I had even said last episode that I felt like Edstrom would have been the guy that, if I had to guess, would be taken out. So injury or not, that may have played itself out anyway. And so Sherry was on the fourth line with Carrick and Radish. Sherry actually had an assist, which we'll talk about, which was after a Ranger penalty kill. It had nothing to do with, like, the fourth line. And in fact, it was interesting seeing Sam Carrick only played 6 minutes and 49 seconds. And I guess that is attributed to the fact that Dallas only had 2 power plays. I was a bit surprised that it was that low. I got to think that's by far one of Sam Carrick's lowest totals. And with that, Noah Laba played 16:41. So rolling more rolling more of a 3-line situation. And so with that, the third line was it was a little bit different. It was Laba centering Cuylle and Berard. So whereas it had been Brodzinski, it's now Cuylle. It gives it a little bit more, it gives it a little bit more balance within the top three. Is how I kind of see that, in my opinion. And honestly, it's basically Noah Laba has looked good. There's just, it hasn't been a whole lot of scoring, but even still, he can keep up. And that's, as a rookie, he's been defensively responsible. I think the Rangers have a player here, even if it's one that may not be someone that puts up a whole lot of points. I think there's definitely something to be encouraged about there. Moving forward, the top six was as follows: Panarin, Zibanejad, Lafreniere, and Miller, Trocheck, Brodzinski. Not really sure where to go here from a line. I kind of want to go more individual than necessarily like from a line standpoint. I guess, I'll say that it felt like the Panarin, Zibanejad, Lafreniere line was solid. Not amazing, but not bad. If I'm to think about things on an individual level. Miller, Trocheck, Brodzinski, not quite as good. And for me, this episode could have had a much, much different tone. And the person who should be most relieved, not because of what I'm saying, but just in general, is JT Miller. Because JT Miller was the reason why Dallas took a 2-1 lead in the third. He has been bad. I've said this for a long time. I'll continue to say it. He looks horrible. And, he played a lot. Like, his ice time certainly wasn't diminished. He's hurting the team. And I don't know what the answer is. If he is somehow hurt, I would sit him if he is. And if he's not, that's more concerning. Because, again, this is a very vital piece of this team. He's the captain. Like, it hasn't worked out at all this year. Other than some good moments. Like, I'd say, overtime, shootout based, or I'll even give it some credit, some power play penalty kill. I'll give him some of the, even if it's not even totally deserved, I'll give him some of the special teams. And again, the 3-on-3 shootout stuff, but it's the real most important, tried and true 5-on-5 action that is just leaving so much to be desired. There's just no way you can watch him play and say, yep, like, and be satisfied with what it's been. So like that would have, I would have started out with that if they lost this game, but it doesn't change what happened. And we'll discuss it, but yeah, just really, really bad. And yeah, I just felt like that line wasn't great, but I digress because overall the Rangers played well. So yeah, Igor Shesterkin versus Casey DeSmith. DeSmith, the backup for Jake Ottinger, but DeSmith's actually been really good. DeSmith actually has had better numbers than Ottinger, even though, Ottinger is the guy in Dallas, but DeSmith, who the Rangers are familiar with from his time with the Pittsburgh Penguins, DeSmith had his work cut out for him. He was definitely a lot more tested than Igor Shesterkin. And, he played fairly well for Dallas in this one. So early on, Tyler Seguin gets hurt in the second shift. Kind of a little bit of an awkward collision with Vladislav Gavrikov, where Gavrikov kind of falls back, and it's a lower body injury for Seguin, and he never returns. So hoping the best for him. Obviously Dallas, they have, I look at them and that's a team that there's a lot of different contributors all around the lineup. And Tyler Seguin, even though he's later in his career, still a really effective player. I mean, has 17 points in 27 games, a +10. Like, Tyler Seguin's been playing some pretty good hockey. So, if he is out, that's a big loss for Dallas, but we'll see. And this was a very even first period. Quite frankly, the first two periods were very even. I mean, there were different portions of time where one team had the edge over the other. First period to me was a fairly over. Whereas the second period, it was more of Dallas was better in the first half of it, and the Rangers were better in the second half, if I were to group it that way. The first period, it's tough for me to say when it just, again, I think saying it was even would be the best way to describe it. But at 4:41, Carson Soucy, who took both Ranger penalties in this game, cross-checks Wyatt Johnston, excuse me, and the Rangers kill it off. So Ranger penalty kill against a very potent Dallas Star power play. Ranger penalty kill does a very good job, and hopefully they're turning a corner, obviously, because they had their struggles for a while, and hopefully they're going to round back into form. And after that penalty is up, Carson Soucy actually scores 10 seconds after the power play had expired. At 6:51, Carson Soucy scores his third goal of the season, assisted by Noah Laba and Connor Sherry. So what happens is Sherry is able to, have a nice pass off the boards to Soucy. And so it's kind of a little bit of a 2-on-1 situation. Soucy's able to do a backhand pass to Noah Laba, who goes straight up the middle. And Laba takes a pretty simple wrist shot that squeaks past the Smith. But Soucy is there. As it's trickling, Soucy is able to get it before the Dallas defender was able to beat him to it. So if Soucy doesn't get there, I do think that it's stopped. I don't think it goes in. You never know. Maybe the Star player kind of fumbles it and something weird happens, but the Smith probably wants to have that back in the sense of, saving that clean. It wasn't like it was a difficult shot by Laba, but a great job all around. Give Connor Sherry credit. He's still looking for his first goal this season, but a smart play to get it to Soucy, finds Laba, and then Soucy's able to tap it home for his third goal of the season, gives the Rangers a 1-0 lead. Now let's go to the tying goal for Dallas at 9:04. So a fairly quick response, and it's a goal by Cuylle Capobianco. His first goal of the season, the journeyman defenseman who has played parts of he's played in the NHL since the 2017-2018 season, mostly with the Coyotes, played a little bit with Winnipeg and has been with Dallas the last couple of years. But yeah, he scores and just bad all the way around. In the shift before, JT Miller turns the puck over, and then a failed connection from Schneider to JT Miller, where JT Miller should have received the pass. And if he does, it's no icing. So not only does Miller turn it over, he's unable to prevent it from being an icing. And then from there, it was just stuck in the Rangers zone. They could not clear it out. It was that Trocheck, Miller, Brodzinski line on, and they were probably a bit gassed from the fact that they shouldn't have been on from the shift before. Gavrikov and Schneider as well. And it's one of those things where, and I think we've seen this before, not from Gavrikov specifically, but just as a recent game where I can recall a Ranger, or maybe the Rangers were the benefit of it, but I think it was the Rangers that were not, where Gavrikov just gives the puck to Capobianco after there was a long bit of possession for Dallas. And the puck, like I said, goes to Gavrikov. He just kind of gives it right to Capobianco, and he takes a snapshot and scores. I don't know if Igor Shesterkin saw it. I think Braden Schneider was in front of him. It might have made a deflect off Ranger as well. Not totally sure, but it's an unassisted goal, and it ties it up at 1 for the Stars in the first period. Then at 11:40, Alexander Petrovic, high sticks, Johnny Brodzinski. Again, Brodzinski continued to draw penalties. It's pretty impressive. For the amount that he's played, he really has given the Rangers power play opportunities. Rangers don't score on that. Again, they go 5 forwards. We'll see if they continue to do that. I think that they will. But it wasn't successful in this game. It wasn't without some chances, but I don't know. Losing Fox is going to be really big for that power play. There's just no question. So they don't score there. And we leave the first period tied at 1. Shots on goal, 10-10. Again, all of the metrics you looked at there, it was pretty much 50-50. So we go to the second period. I thought Dallas had a little bit of the better of play, first half of the period. And eventually penalties start to take shape. And that, I feel like, helped the Rangers, it saved them from what maybe could have been, a decently dominated period by Dallas. So Noah Laba draws an interference penalty at 12:37. Again, Rangers don't score. Then at 15:10, Carson Soucy trips Mikko Rantanen. And Will Borgen was kind of involved in that as well. Will Borgen, was a culprit there that led to Soucy taking that penalty, but Rangers kill it off. And then at 17:59, Oscar Bach holds Mika Zibanejad, and so the Rangers get a power play in the last 2 minutes of the second period. Don't score there either. So yeah, kind of continuous flow of really not much even strength, right? You look at that, really the last 8 or so minutes of the second period was really just dominated by power play time. So we go to the third period tied at 1, and for the most part, the Rangers have had their struggles in these situations, although I can think of some times where it's not completely that way. I can think of some times where the Rangers were successful. But I feel like for the most part, these sort of, and I feel like the Rangers so many times this year, like 1-1 games going to the third. It just feels like that's a very common score in Ranger games. And the Rangers played a very good third period. And at 4:13, Sam Steele, high sticks Alexis Lafreniere, a double minor high sticking. Lafreniere would leave for a little bit, get stitched up, or because he was bleeding pretty badly. And he'd be back in there. Lafreniere, look, I mean, it is what it is, right? It has been very good, but he did some good things in this game. And I know we're setting a low bar there, but I thought Lafreniere was all right for what it was worth. Still not great, but he does draw that penalty, but the Rangers don't score on the 4 minute. And there were a lot of chances for sure on this one specifically. You're given 4 minutes. Naturally, you're going to have, more time to do stuff, but they don't score past Casey DeSmith. And not too much after it, at 9:32, Mikko Rantanen scores his 11th goal of the season, assisted by Wyatt Johnston. And this is a play where JT Miller turns it over to Wyatt Johnston. And with Braden Schneider, pinching, it was imperative for JT Miller to not turn the puck over. Was Braden Schneider too aggressive? Maybe we could argue that, but JT Miller was in position. He was in position to, take that spot on the right point there at the blue line. And it's taken, and JT Miller, who again, it's just been a nightmare train wreck. It's a 2-on-1 the other way. Gavrikov slides down. Wyatt Johnston shows patience, passes to Rantanen, who scores past Shesterkin. There was nothing that Igor could do on that one. And the Stars take a 2-1 lead. So it's like, it was looking like, all right, like that's going to be it. JT Miller, yet again, a big reason for a loss, but the Rangers showed some fight in this one and found a way. They pull the goalie at 6-on-5. And at 17:47, Will Cuylle ties it up. His 8th goal of the season, assisted by Trocheck and Panarin. And give JT Miller, honestly, all forwards credit on this one. Because JT Miller did win the faceoff pretty cleanly. So you got to give him that. He starts it, and that was huge. And we know in these empty net situations, lots of times against the Rangers, it's very quick where the opposing team scores right at the empty net. Rangers did not allow for that to happen. There was puck movement all around. And what ends up happening is Panarin takes a shot from the point. It's deflected by Trocheck. And it ends up where Cuylle is alone in front. And it's kind of one of those goals that you might see from like Chris Kreider, in his heyday here where, in a 6-on-5 situation, kind of being that net front presence there. And look, a little bit of fortune. The fact that the way it went off of DeSmith and in, but you'll take it any way you can get it. Rangers tied up at 2 and we go to overtime. And with no Adam Fox, that hurts. I mean, Will Borgen and I was surprised by this. Borgen actually was the first defenseman out there. It was Miller, I believe it was Miller Trocheck, and Borgen, I think, or it was either Miller Trocheck or Miller Cuylle. Either way, with Borgen. But they make a switch. And, Dallas had possession, loses it, as in these 3-on-3 overtimes. Possession is everything. And the Rangers get the puck, and it's Mika Zibanejad going in with a little bit of speed into the Dallas zone, and he drops it off to Panarin. Panarin waits, takes a wrist shot that is stopped by DeSmith, but in comes Vladislav Gavrikov, kind of slips past Heiskanen and is able to score backhand to give the Rangers the win 3-2 in overtime. The goal is at 109. Gavrikov is 5th of the season from Panarin and Zibanejad. So Artemi Panarin gets a couple of points late in the game. And the Rangers win 3-2. I mean, they outshot Dallas 18-3, 18-4 in the third period. Just impressive stuff. Rangers with a season high 41 shots on goal. And look, it's a little bit of a blueprint for the Rangers because if they're going to win games, this is going to be how it is. More low scoring, close games, and you have to make plays. I know it's simple, but in the clutch key moments, you're going to have to deliver. And that is what they did. And I didn't think they would. I mean, and why should I have thought that, given the fact that it had been so long since they had tied a game up in that scenario? We hadn't seen it, since the 23-24 season. But they got it done, improved to 14-12-2. Again, a lot of work needs to be done for this Ranger team. As it stands now, I don't believe this is a playoff team, but they've shown that they will hang in there. They've shown that the bottom has not fallen out. And so give them credit for that. They're not a bad team. Look, the Rangers, they're not a bad team. They are devoid of skill and talent. That's the biggest problem that I have with them. It's and they throw in, the occasional just horrible game. And that's what you can't afford. So the Rangers now are 3-1 at home. This is, clearly their best home, out of the three. They beat Nashville, St. Louis, and now Dallas. So clearly the best home win of the season. And now they'll go to Ottawa to take on the Senators, who are coming off of a win at Montreal. I think when all is said and done, I think that Ottawa will be a playoff team in the Eastern Conference. They were last year. They haven't been great. They're 13-4. Look, it's a big game for the Rangers when you look, if you really do have aspirations for the playoffs, which is like, again, talking about that it really doesn't fit in a way. But obviously that is the goal. And if you are to really have hopes for something like that, Ottawa probably is an important team to beat. We saw that last year, and Ottawa got the better. I mean, Rangers, I think about that game in Ottawa, the Saturday matinee game. That was a really big jumping off point for the Senators. The Rangers blew the game late. Ottawa won in overtime, and they really didn't look back from there. And they lost, in the first round to the Maple Leafs, but still, this will be a pretty good test. I mean, not as much as, these home games, Dallas, and then after the Ottawa game on the road, they go back home for Colorado and Vegas. So those definitely do feel more daunting than this Ottawa game. But let's see what happens. It's a winnable game for the Rangers, I would say, but at the same time, who knows? So another side note here, like I said, Adam Fox goes on long-term IR. Spencer Martin was called up, journeyman goalie who, was signed by the Rangers, I want to say within the last 3 or 4 weeks, maybe less than that. And Dylan Garand was sent down. And look, if he's not going to be in there, which he's not going to be, he's a young goalie. He should be in Hartford, and Martin should be the backup until Jonathan Quick is back. It seems like Quick isn't that far away. And with the back-to-back coming up this weekend, the hope, I would guess, would be that Jonathan Quick would be back, right? Where maybe you go with Igor against Colorado, for example, and then maybe Quick is good to go for the Sunday night game against Vegas. I think that would be, if they could script it up their way, the Rangers, that would probably be what it is. And then subsequently Spencer Martin would be sent down at that point. So, this was a gutsy win for the Rangers. Unexpected late comeback. First time in a long time they did that, and they're able to seal it with a Vladislav Gavrikov goal in overtime for a 3-2 win against the Dallas Stars.